"Don't move!" a rough voice shouted. The crowd gasped as a train horn screamed through the tunnel. A little girl stood frozen near the edge of the platform, her tiny hands trembling. And beside her, a homeless man leapt forward. In one desperate motion, he grabbed her jacket and rolled them both onto the ground, just as the subway thundered past. The wind whipped dust into the air. Screams echoed, and when the noise faded, the man lay still, shielding the girl with his body. People stared, wide-eyed, unsure if they'd just witnessed a rescue or a crime. Moments earlier, the station had been filled with the normal chaos of rush hour. Victoria Hale clutched her daughter Emily's hand, distracted by the constant vibration of her phone. Messages from her board buzzed non-stop. Her company's new product launch was only hours away. She didn't notice when Emily slipped from her grasp to pick up a coin that rolled across the platform. "Emily," she shouted, turning and froze. Her daughter stood inches from the edge, eyes wide, paralyzed as a train's lights roared closer, and beside her, a dirty figure in tattered clothes suddenly moved. Jack Turner didn't think. He hadn't thought in years, not since his world had burned down in a fire that took his workshop, his home, and everything else he cared about. Instinct drove him now, the same instinct that once made him a great mechanic. He saw the danger, measured the seconds, and jumped. The girl was small, fragile, terrified. He yanked her back with all his strength, rolling hard onto the concrete as the train's metal body screamed past inches from his face. His shoulder slammed the ground. Pain tore through him, but the child was alive. The silence after the train passed was deafening. Then came the whispers. "He pushed her!" someone cried. "No, he saved her!" another voice shouted. Panic spread like wildfire. Victoria ran forward, scooping Emily into her arms, tears streaming down her face. The homeless man, the stranger, was still catching his breath, coughing from the dust. His hands trembled as he tried to sit up. "She's fine," he rasped, voice hoarse from the smoke and years of street life. But no one listened. Two men grabbed his arms roughly, dragging him to his feet. "Hey, let me go." A woman nearby was shaking, clutching her phone. "I saw him grab her. He was too close," she yelled. The crowd fed on the chaos, turning suspicion into accusation. Uniformed officers rushed down the stairs, pushing through the sea of faces. Victoria, still trembling, didn't know what to think. It all happened too fast. The man's eyes met hers, weary, brown, filled with something she didn't expect, sincerity. "I didn't hurt her," he said quietly. "I just couldn't watch." Before she could speak, an officer shoved him against the wall. The cuffs clicked shut. They hauled Jack toward the exit as bystanders filmed, their phones glowing like judgmental eyes. "Another psycho off the streets," someone muttered. "He's lucky she's alive." Jack didn't resist. He'd been through worse. The world had long ago decided what he was: a failure, a nuisance, invisible until something went wrong. His shoulder ached. His head spun. But he only cared about the girl's terrified face. She had reminded him of someone of his daughter, long gone. That was why he jumped. Not for thanks, not for glory. Just to keep another father from knowing that pain. At the precinct, the air smelled of coffee and bleach. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Jack sat at a metal table, dripping rainwater onto the floor. Across from him, Officer Brooks flipped through his notepad. Name? Jack Turner. Address? Jack gave a hollow laugh. You got a map? It changes every night. Brooks sighed, rubbing his temples. Witnesses say you pushed the kid. Jack's jaw clenched. And what does the kid say? Brooks hesitated. She's still in shock, too scared to talk. Jack looked down at his scraped hands. He didn't blame her. The world always saw monsters first. Meanwhile, Victoria sat in her car outside the station, clutching a blanket around Emily. Rain hammered the windshield. Her daughter's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, he saved me." Victoria turned slowly. "What did you say?" Emily nodded, tears glistening. "He pulled me back. I almost fell." Guilt hit Victoria like a wave. She had believed the crowd, the noise, the chaos, but her daughter's voice cut through it all. "We have to go to the police," she whispered. For the first time that day, her business calls didn't matter. Nothing did, except the truth. At the station, Brooks sighed as the door opened. "Mrs. Hale," he said, surprised. Victoria stepped in, holding Emily close. "I want to speak to the man you arrested," she said firmly. Jack looked up from the table, surprised to see her. Her tailored coat and perfect posture seemed out of place next to his soaked, filthy clothes. "He saved my daughter," Victoria said clearly. Brooks frowned. "Ma'am, are you sure? The witnesses, they were wrong," she interrupted. "My daughter saw everything." Silence filled the room. Jack blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. Officer Brooks exhaled slowly. "If that's the case, we'll need to review the footage." He stepped outside, leaving Victoria and Jack alone. The air between them was heavy. Victoria looked at him, really looked. His face was lined, his hands rough, his clothes soaked through. But his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a drunk or a madman. They were sharp, calculating, and tired in a way only someone who'd lost everything could be. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. Jack's answer was simple. "Because no one else would." Brooks returned with a small nod. "Station camera confirms it." He pulled her back just before the train passed. Relief washed over Victoria's face. Jack just stared at the floor. "You're free to go," Brooks said, unlocking the cuffs. Jack rubbed his wrists, muttering a quiet, "Thanks." He stood, ready to disappear back into the rain. But Victoria stopped him. "Wait," she said. "At least let me thank you properly." Jack gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You just did." Then he walked out into the storm, his figure swallowed by the city lights. Days passed. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing him the mystery homeless hero. Most called it a miracle. Some accused it of being staged. Jack didn't care. He never read the papers. He stayed near the station, sleeping under the same bridge, his mind replaying the girl's frightened face. He hadn't meant to be a hero. Heroes had homes, people, purpose. He just reacted. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done with him. Because one evening, as he sat by a flickering barrel fire, a sleek black car stopped nearby. The door opened, and Victoria stepped out, holding an umbrella. Her driver stayed behind the wheel, uncertain. She looked almost out of place among the cracked walls and graffiti. "You're hard to find," she said softly. Jack smirked. "People like me try not to be found." She hesitated, then extended a hand. "Please, I want to help." Jack stared at her polished nails, her diamond ring, her designer coat. She didn't belong in his world. "I don't need charity," he said. "It's not charity," she replied quietly. "It's gratitude." He didn't take her hand, but he didn't walk away either. "You don't owe me anything," he muttered. "You saved my daughter," Victoria said. That's not nothing. Jack looked away, jaw tightening. I didn't do it for you. She nodded slowly. Then do it for yourself. At least let me buy you dinner. The rain pattered softly on the umbrella. For a moment, Jack considered it. The warmth, the food, the human company. But old habits died hard. I'm fine, he said finally. But thanks. He turned, ready to vanish again, until he heard Emily's voice. Please don't go, she said, her small face peeking from the car window. Jack froze. The sincerity in her voice cracked something inside him. He turned slowly, meeting her innocent gaze. You're not scared of me? He asked, softly. She shook her head. You saved me. Why would I be scared? The words hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He sighed, then gave a small nod. Okay, dinner. Victoria smiled faintly, relief washing over her. The three of them stepped into the car as the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windows. At the restaurant, heads turned the moment they walked in. A millionaire, her daughter, and a homeless man. It looked like a social experiment. Jack felt every stare. His clothes were cleanish, but still ragged, his hair a mess. Yet Victoria ignored the whispers. Order whatever you want, she said gently. Jack picked at the menu, overwhelmed. Haven't eaten like this since, he trailed off. She didn't push. Instead, she told Emily stories, letting laughter fill the silence. For the first time in years, Jack felt like a person, not a problem. After dinner, as they stepped outside, Victoria handed him a card. If you ever need anything work, a place to stay, call this number. Jack took it hesitantly, pocketing it without a word. Good night, Mr. Turner, she said warmly. Good night, ma'am. He watched the car drive away until its lights vanished. Then he pulled out the card and stared at the name embossed in gold. Victoria Hale, CEO, Hale Technologies. He had no idea that the piece of paper in his hand would soon pull him into a fight that would test everything he believed about himself. That night, as he lay under the bridge, Jack couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the concrete pillars, and the city hummed with distant sirens. He pulled the card from his pocket again, tracing the letters with his thumb. A place to stay, he muttered. Yeah, right. Still, something about her eyes, her sincerity, had stuck with him. People didn't look at him like that anymore. Not since the fire. Not since he lost it all. He drifted into uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of fire, of screams, of the night he failed to save his wife and daughter. When he woke, the card was still in his hand. The sun rose weakly through the fog. He sat there for a long time debating. Pride told him to stay away, but hunger and a flicker of something like hope pushed him to stand. Maybe, just maybe, this was a second chance. By afternoon, Jack stood outside the gleaming glass doors of Hale Technologies. He stared at his reflection, the scars, the exhaustion, the man no one trusted. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The receptionist looked startled, ready to call security, until a voice called from the balcony above. It's okay, Victoria said, smiling down at him. He's with me. Every head turned. The homeless man who once lived in the shadows had just walked into the world of the rich, and nothing would ever be the same again. Jack stood awkwardly in the lobby of Hale Technologies, surrounded by glass walls and polished floors that reflected his every imperfection. People in suits glanced at him, whispering. He'd felt eyes on him before, but this was different. These were eyes filled with judgment, not cruelty. Still, He'd made it this far. A security guard started toward him, but Victoria appeared, graceful and confident as ever. "It's okay," she said, waving the guard off. "He's with me." The words hung in the air like something unreal. He's with me. For the first time in years, someone claimed him. She led him upstairs to her office, a breathtaking space overlooking the city skyline. Jack stood near the window, unsure what to do with his hands. "Sit," Victoria said kindly. "You must be wondering why I asked you here." Jack shrugged. "A little." She smiled faintly. "You saved my daughter, Mr. Turner. The least I can do is make sure you're not sleeping under a bridge anymore." He frowned. "I don't take handouts." "Then don't," she said softly. "Take an opportunity." She slid a folder toward him. Inside was a job offer maintenance technician, full-time, with housing included. Jack stared at the paper. His throat tightened. It had been years since anyone trusted him with responsibility, let alone employment. "You don't even know me," he said. "I know enough," Victoria replied. "You act when others freeze. You see what people miss. I need people like that." He wanted to argue, but her tone left no room for debate. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll work." She smiled. "Good. Then welcome to Hale Technologies." As he shook her hand, a strange feeling stirred inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Dignity. His first weeks at the company were uneasy. The employees avoided him, whispering behind his back. "The boss's charity case," one said. "Probably an ex-con," another muttered. Jack ignored them. He had work to do. Machines didn't judge, wires didn't gossip, and that suited him fine. He fixed things no one else could. One day, Victoria stopped by the workshop and found him dismantling a circuit board. "You built this yourself?" she asked, astonished. "Old habits die hard," he said with a smirk. She nodded approvingly. "You're wasted in repairs, Jack." He just grunted. "Maybe, but at least it's honest." In time, even the whispers began to fade. People couldn't deny his skill. He fixed the server room cooling system in an hour, something a whole team had failed to do. He repaired the CEO's private elevator using only scrap parts. Word reached Victoria fast. "You're full of surprises," she said one afternoon. Jack chuckled. "Guess I remember a thing or two from my old life." "You used to be an engineer, didn't you?" she asked. His expression darkened. "Used to be a lot of things." She didn't press, but her curiosity about him only grew stronger. Then one night, while working late, Jack noticed something strange in the control system. A sequence of network errors that didn't belong. They looked intentional, like someone had inserted them. He frowned, scrolling through the code. Someone was rerouting data, copying confidential files to an external server. He'd seen this kind of thing before, back when his old company was sabotaged by a competitor. He hesitated, debating what to do. Technically, this wasn't his job. But instinct told him one thing clearly. Someone was trying to hurt Victoria's company from the inside. The next morning, he waited in her office as the city shimmered beyond the glass. "You're early," she said, surprised. "Something wrong?" He nodded slowly. "I think you've got a leak in your system." Her brow furrowed. "A leak?" "A data breach," he clarified. "Someone's been siphoning files for weeks. My guess it's internal." She blinked, stunned. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," he said dryly. "I used to build systems like this." Victoria's expression shifted from disbelief to alarm. "Show me." Together, they combed through the files until the evidence became undeniable. Someone close was betraying her. Victoria called her security chief immediately, but something in his tone unsettled Jack. The man seemed too calm, too indifferent. When he left, Jack muttered, "You trust that guy?" Victoria frowned. "Of course, he's been with me for years." Jack shook his head. "I've seen that look before. He's hiding something." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I appreciate your concern, Jack, but you're a mechanic, not an investigator." He smiled faintly. "I was a lot of things before I ended up under a bridge." The tension between them lingered, a mix of respect and doubt neither could ignore. That night, unable to shake his instincts, Jack returned to the building. He bypassed the side entrance, using an old engineer's trick with a paperclip and a screwdriver. Inside, the hallways were dark, except for the glow of monitors. He followed the hum of servers until he heard voices low, urgent, dangerous. Peeking around the corner, he saw the security chief and two strangers in suits, uploading files onto a hard drive. "We deliver this tonight, and Hell Technologies is finished," one whispered. Jack's blood ran cold. He had been right, and now he was alone with the proof. He stepped forward, his voice rough. "You boys picked the wrong night." The men froze, turning toward him. "Who the hell are you?" the chief sneered. "Maintenance," Jack said simply. "And right now, maintenance says it's time to shut you down." One of the suits laughed. "Cute. You think you're a hero?" The man lunged, and Jack swung the nearest tool, a metal wrench. It connected with a sickening crack. The fight exploded. Jack ducked a punch, drove his knee into another man's ribs, and grabbed the drive. But the chief pulled a gun, fury flashing in his eyes. "Drop it!" the chief barked. Jack froze, the hard drive in his hand. "You have no idea who you're messing with," the man growled. "This isn't just about money. It's about power." Jack smirked, even as sweat ran down his face. "You sound like every crook I ever met." The chief aimed lower. "Last chance, hero." But before he could shoot, a voice echoed from the doorway. "Put it down, Carl." Victoria stood there, pale but composed, a security escort behind her. The chief cursed under his breath. "You should have stayed out of this," he hissed. "Too late," she said. The standoff lasted seconds but felt eternal. Then, in a sudden motion, the chief turned his gun toward Victoria. Jack moved first. He tackled the man to the ground, the shot going wide and shattering a screen. The impact jarred Jack's injured shoulder, pain flaring through him, but he didn't stop. He wrestled the gun away and slammed the man's head into the floor, ending the struggle. The room went silent except for Victoria's heavy breathing. Jack stood slowly, blood dripping from his lip. "Told you he was hiding something," he muttered. Victoria stared, shaken. "You saved my life." Police arrived minutes later, cuffing the conspirators and collecting the stolen data. Victoria watched as they were led away, still trembling. Jack sat on a bench, exhausted. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, then looked at him with something new in her eyes, not just gratitude, but respect. "How did you know?" he shrugged. "When you've lost everything, you start noticing the cracks in people." She smiled faintly. "You're wasted as a mechanic," he chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm not planning a career in heroics." But deep down, a flicker of pride warmed him. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. CEO's life saved by former homeless man. Reporters camped outside the building. Victoria's PR team begged her to issue a statement, but she refused to spin it. "Just tell them the truth," she said. "He earned it." Jack, meanwhile, wanted nothing to do with fame. Cameras made him uncomfortable. Reporters called him the Broken Guardian. He hated the name, but couldn't deny people looked at him differently now. For once, not with disgust, but with admiration. Victoria offered him a permanent position, not just as an engineer, but as her personal security advisor. "You've proven you see danger before anyone else," she told him. "And I trust you." Jack hesitated. "Why me?" She smiled softly. "Because you don't want anything from me. That's rare in my world." He accepted quietly, knowing this was more than a job, it was a second chance. Weeks passed, and Jack's life began to shift. He moved into a small apartment provided by the company. He bought new clothes, shaved, even fixed an old motorcycle he found abandoned in a junkyard. But though his appearance changed, his humility didn't. Every morning, he'd stop by the same alley and leave food for the homeless who still lived there. "Just because you get lucky," he'd say softly, "doesn't mean you forget where you came from." One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Victoria invited him to her home for dinner. Emily was waiting at the door, grinning from ear to ear. "Mr. Turner," she squealed. "Mom made spaghetti," Jack laughed, something warm blooming in his chest. Dinner was quiet but comfortable. For once, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Victoria raised her glass. "To unlikely heroes," she said. Jack raised his too, smiling faintly. "And second chances." Later that night, as he prepared to leave, Victoria stopped him at the door. "You've changed our lives," she said softly. "You gave me my daughter back. You saved my company. I don't even know how to thank you." Jack looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his tired eyes. "You already did," he said simply. "You believed me when no one else would." Outside, the cool night air hit his face. He walked to his motorcycle, the city alive with neon and noise. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace. The streets that once rejected him now whispered his name like a quiet legend, not because of fame or power, but because he had chosen to stand when everyone else turned away. Jack Turner, once a nameless shadow, had become something more. A protector, a man who rebuilt his life not through fortune, but through courage. And as he rode through the sleeping city, rain beginning to fall again, he couldn't help but smile. Life, he thought, had finally given him back what it took away: purpose. For weeks, peace seemed almost real. Jack settled into his new life, steady work, quiet evenings, the occasional dinner with Victoria and Emily. He'd begun to forget the cold sting of rain under bridges, the hunger that gnawed at his bones. But peace never lasted long for men like him. One night, he found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. Inside was a single photograph, him, Victoria, and Emily leaving the Hale Technologies building, and written in black ink across the bottom, "We remember you, Turner." His heart stopped. The past had finally caught up. Jack's old life, the one he'd buried, wasn't as forgotten as he'd hoped. Before everything burned, he had worked for a manufacturing firm that had once supplied parts to criminal syndicates. When Jack discovered the truth and exposed them, the fire came. They'd destroyed his home and killed his family as revenge. He thought they were gone, but now someone was reminding him that debts never truly disappear. He stared at the photo for a long time, then quietly tore it in half, but deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, Victoria noticed the tension in him. "You haven't said a word since you came in," she said gently. Jack forced a smile. "Just tired." She frowned, unconvinced. "Jack, you've carried ghosts long enough. Whatever's haunting you, you don't have to face it alone." He met her eyes, wanting to believe her. But he couldn't drag her into the darkness that was now crawling back into his life. "Some ghosts don't rest easy," he murmured. "Better, I deal with them myself." She didn't press, but worry flickered in her gaze. 2 nights later, as he left work, he noticed a black car tailing him. He turned into an alley, pretending not to notice, but when he reached the corner, 2 men stepped out from the shadows. "Evening, Turner," one said, grinning. "Long time." Jack froze. He recognized the voice Tony Mendez, a mid-level enforcer for the syndicate he'd exposed years ago. "Didn't think rats like you survived the fire," Tony sneered. "Boss wants a word." Jack's jaw clenched. "Tell your boss I don't do business anymore," Tony laughed. "Oh, you're doing this one. Or your rich girlfriend gets the visit instead." Jack's fists tightened. "Leave her out of this," he growled. Tony smirked. "That's up to you." Before Jack could react, the second man swung a pipe. Pain exploded behind his ear, and the world spun into darkness. When he came to, he was tied to a chair in a dim warehouse, the air thick with gasoline and rot. A man in a tailored suit sat across from him, older, elegant, and cruelly calm. "Jack Turner," the man said smoothly. "You cost me a fortune years ago, but I'm a forgiving man, so let's make a deal." Jack glared through the haze of pain. "I don't make deals with devils." The man chuckled. "You misunderstand. I'm offering you redemption. Work for me again. Help me get inside Hale Technologies. You know their systems now. You can make me a rich man." Jack spat blood. "You'll never touch her company." The man's smile vanished. "Then I'll touch something else. Her daughter, perhaps?" The room went silent. Jack's heart pounded. "You go near that girl, and I swear—" "You'll what?" the man interrupted, leaning closer. "You're a ghost, Turner. No one will even know you're gone." "Oh." They left him alone in the dark, bound and bleeding. Hours passed. He tested the ropes, his wrists burning, until finally one gave way. He used the jagged edge of a broken pipe to cut himself free, wincing with every movement. As he stumbled to his feet, one thought consumed him. They knew about Victoria and Emily. They were going after them. He grabbed a phone from a table and dialed her number, but there was no signal. Panic rose in his chest. He didn't have time to think. He had to move. By dawn, he found an abandoned truck and drove, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The city skyline rose ahead, golden in the early light. His mind raced. How could he have let this happen? He'd brought danger straight to their doorstep. As he neared Victoria's mansion, his worst fears came true. The gate was open, the guards gone. Smoke drifted from the front porch. He slammed the truck into park and ran. "Victoria!" he shouted. "Emily!" The silence that followed was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. Then a cry, faint, muffled. He kicked the door open, coughing through the smoke. Furniture was overturned, glass shattered. He followed the sound to the living room. Victoria was there, tied to a chair, blood on her forehead. "Jack!" she gasped. "They took Emily!" The words hit like bullets. "How long ago?" 10 minutes, they said. They said they'd kill her if I called the police. Jack's hands shook as he untied her. "You're not losing her," he said through gritted teeth. "Not today." They found a clue: tire tracks in the mud, leading toward the docks. Jack's mind went cold, sharp. He knew where they'd taken her, the same warehouse where they held him. "Stay here," he told Victoria. She grabbed his arm. "You can't go alone. If I don't, they'll kill her before we get there." "Then I'm coming," she said firmly. He wanted to argue, but the fire in her eyes silenced him. The woman who once lived behind glass walls was ready to fight for her daughter. And Jack, he wasn't letting her do it alone. They arrived at the docks just as the rain began to fall. The warehouse loomed ahead, lights flickering inside. Jack parked far enough to stay unseen. He handed Victoria a small flashlight. "Stay behind me," he whispered. They crept through the side door, the floorboards creaking. Voices echoed inside. "The boss wants the girl alive," someone said. "For now." Jack's blood boiled. He motioned for Victoria to stay low and slipped deeper into the shadows. Every step measured. He spotted Emily tied to a chair, tears streaking her cheeks, and two guards nearby, his hands curled into fists. He remembered the wrench fight weeks ago, the way his body moved without thought. Old instincts flared again. He crept behind the first guard, silent as rain, and struck one punch to the neck, one to the jaw. The man dropped. The second turned, startled, but Jack was faster. He slammed him into the wall and pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he whispered, knocking him out cold. Victoria ran to Emily, cutting the ropes with trembling hands. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," she whispered. Emily sobbed, clinging to her, but the reunion was short-lived. A gun cocked behind them. "Touching," drawled the crime boss. "But now it's my turn." Jack turned slowly, eyes like steel. The man smirked. "You really thought you could outrun me twice?" "No," Jack said. "Just long enough to make sure you fall." Then, with lightning speed, he threw a metal tool across the room. It hit the lights, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the air, sparks flashing. Jack moved like a shadow, disarming one man, tackling another. The boss fired blindly, shouting curses. Victoria shielded Emily behind a stack of crates. "Jack!" she cried, as a bullet grazed his shoulder. He grunted, biting back pain, and lunged forward, tackling the boss to the ground. The two men struggled, fists flying. The boss reached for his gun again, but Jack grabbed a loose pipe and swung with all his strength. The sound echoed final, brutal, decisive. Silence fell. Jack stood over the fallen man, chest heaving, rain mixing with blood. Victoria stared, trembling. "Is he?" "He won't hurt anyone again," Jack said quietly. He turned to Emily, kneeling beside her. "You okay, kid?" She nodded through tears. "You came back for me." He smiled weakly. "Always." For the first time, the fear in her eyes vanished, replaced by trust. Police sirens wailed in the distance as they stepped outside into the rain. Victoria clung to Emily while Jack limped behind, his shirt soaked crimson. "You're hurt," she said, panic rising. "I've had worse," he muttered with a faint grin. When the officers arrived, she told them everything: the kidnapping, the syndicate, the man who saved them. By the time paramedics reached Jack, he was barely conscious. "Stay with me," Victoria shouted as they loaded him into the ambulance. His last words before fading out were simple: "Tell Emily she's safe." And the spreek passiva, hard. Days later, Jack woke in a hospital bed, arm bandaged, shoulder stitched. The sunlight through the window felt unreal. Victoria sat nearby, smiling softly. "You gave us quite a scare," she said. "Did I?" he rasped. "Well, glad I'm still useful," she laughed, wiping her eyes. "You're more than that, Jack. You're family now." The word hit him harder than any wound. Family. He hadn't heard it in years. Emily burst into the room, holding a small, drawing a picture of Jack standing beside her and her mother. "That's us," she said proudly. Jack smiled, his throat tight. "Looks about right." Victoria glanced at him. "We owe you everything." He shook his head, slowly. "You don't owe me a thing. You gave me my life back." The words hung in the quiet room, heavy and true. Weeks later, Jack returned to work not as a mechanic, but as head of security at Hale Technologies. He walked the halls with quiet authority, his once ragged clothes replaced by a sharp jacket. People greeted him with respect now, but he never forgot the streets, the hunger, or the rain. Sometimes, on his way home, he'd stop by the bridge and leave food behind, whispering to the shadows, "Keep going, it gets better." As the city lights shimmered on the river, Jack stood with Victoria and Emily on the rooftop terrace, the night calm at last. "Funny," he said softly. "The world called me a nobody. Guess they were wrong." Victoria smiled. "You were never a nobody, Jack. You were just waiting for the right story to find you." He looked out at the skyline, the city that broke him, and the people who healed him, and smiled. For the first time in years, he truly believed it.